Right at this very moment, while you are sitting here listening to this, your brain is either quietly rebuilding itself or it is quietly losing ground. There is no neutral, no pause button. And the difference between those two paths comes down to something almost nobody over 60 has ever been told. 99% of seniors have no idea that the 2 hours before sleep are not empty, wasted time. They are the most important window your brain has all day. What you eat in that window can either feed the slow fading of your memory, or it can actively repair it while you rest tonight. I need to be completely clear with you before I go any further. I am not selling you a supplement. I am not affiliated with any company, and I have nothing to gain from which foods you choose to eat tonight. What I am about to share comes from real food, the kind already sitting in your refrigerator or your local grocery store this very moment. Food that researchers at major universities have studied carefully and found can calm the inflammation eating away at brain tissue and support the brain's ability to grow new connections overnight while you do nothing but sleep. And here is the part that breaks my heart a little every time I think about it. Most people past 60 are unknowingly starving their brain at the exact hour it is begging to be fed, not because they are careless, not because they don't care about their health, because nobody ever told them this window existed in the first place. That ends tonight. Everything I share with you is based on published research and clinical patterns I have seen repeatedly. But your body is unique, and your medication list, your conditions, your history, none of that is something a video can fully account for. Please confirm anything significant with your own doctor before making changes. With that said, let me show you what your doctor almost certainly never had time to explain. Here is the truth, and I want you to really hear this. Most physicians get about 10 minutes with you. 10 minutes to manage blood pressure, review medications, ask about your knees, check your labs, and there is simply no time left over to talk about what you eat before bed. That is not your doctor's fault. I want to say that again, slowly, because it matters. That is not your doctor's fault. That is a broken system built around billing codes and insurance reimbursement schedules, not around nutrition, and certainly not around the slow, patient work of protecting your memory over decades. Tonight, I am giving you the time that system was never built to give you. Now, before I get into the 5 foods, I have to tell you about a number that stopped me cold the first time I came across it. A study out of the University of Toronto looked at memory consolidation in adults over 65. Researchers compared eating habits to performance on memory tests the next morning. Those who ate the right foods within 90 minutes of sleep showed meaningfully stronger memory scores than those who ate nothing or ate poorly before bed. Now, I want to be honest with you. The studies in this area aren't perfect, and individual results vary widely from person to person. But the direction of the data is hard to argue with, and it lines up with what I've seen again and again in the people I've worked with. Think about what that actually means for you, in real terms, not just on a chart somewhere. It is the difference between walking straight to where you left your glasses and spending 20 frustrating minutes searching every room in the house, growing more anxious with every empty drawer. It is the difference between remembering your grandson's birthday without thinking twice, and that cold, sinking blank feeling so many of you have described to me as one of the most frightening parts of growing older. Not the wrinkles, not the slower knees, the blank feeling, the pause where a name used to be. Hold on to that thought, because the food sitting at number 1 tonight is something almost every senior has been told for years to avoid completely. I will tell you exactly why that advice is outdated, and I promise it will surprise you. Stay with me to the very end, because that final food is the one I recommend most strongly of all 5, and the reasoning behind it might change how you think about an entire category of food you've been avoiding. But before I continue, drop a comment for me right now. Tell me your age, and tell me honestly, have you noticed any change in your memory or your sharpness over the last few years? I read every comment. Your honest answers shape what I bring you next, and they remind me why this information matters so much to so many people. Now, let me begin. 5 foods, counting down from 5 to 1, ranked from helpful to the single most powerful brain repairing food you can eat before bed. Number 5, the blueberry. Most people think of blueberries as a topping, a sweet little snack, nothing more, a pleasant afterthought on top of oatmeal. But blueberries, especially the smaller wild variety, carry one of the highest concentrations of anthocyanins of any food on Earth. Anthocyanins are the deep blue-purple pigments that give the berry its color, and they happen to be among the most studied brain protective compounds in nutritional science today. Here is what most doctors don't have time to explain, so stay with me, because this next part is going to make everything else tonight make more sense. As you age, your brain slowly accumulates something called neuroinflammation. Picture it like a traffic jam clogging your brain's communication highways during rush hour. The signals still try to get through. Cars still inch forward. But everything slows down. Connections get tangled. Memories struggle to form, and struggle even more to be pulled back up later when you actually need them, like trying to find a single car in gridlock that stretches for miles. After 70, this kind of inflammation tends to rise sharply in most people, and many researchers now consider it one of the primary engines behind age-related memory decline. This is where blueberries step in, quietly and consistently. Their anthocyanins are small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, which works like a security checkpoint your brain uses to filter out almost everything that tries to get in. Most compounds never make it through. Anthocyanins do. Once inside, these compounds help calm the inflammatory signals responsible for damaging the very neurons that hold your memories, easing that traffic jam from the inside out. A study published in the journal Nutritional Neuroscience followed older adults eating wild blueberries daily for 12 weeks and found measurable improvements in memory and in what is called executive function, your brain's ability to plan, organize, and make decisions about your day. It was a modest-sized study, so take the exact numbers with some caution, the way I do. But the pattern lines up with several other trials looking at the same compounds, and that consistency across different research groups is exactly what makes me pay attention. Eating blueberries in the evening matters because it puts these protective compounds into your bloodstream right as your brain begins its overnight repair work, right when the construction crew clocks in, so to speak. About half a cup of fresh or frozen wild blueberries, 60 to 90 minutes before bed, paired with a small amount of healthy fat for better absorption. Hold on to that fat idea. I'll come back to it very soon because it shows up again and again tonight. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Frozen blueberries? Are they really as good as fresh? In most studies, yes. Frozen wild blueberries retain the vast majority of their anthocyanin content, and they're often more affordable and available year-round, which makes this an easy habit to actually keep up with. One quick note here, and I want you to take this seriously. If you are on blood-thinning medication like warfarin, talk to your doctor before adding large daily amounts of berries, simply because some berries can mildly affect clotting in sensitive individuals. For most people, this is a non-issue, but it is worth a 5-minute conversation at your next appointment, not something to guess about on your own. But if you think blueberries are interesting, wait until you hear what is sitting in almost every senior's refrigerator right now, completely underused, completely misunderstood. Number 4, Greek yogurt. The reason Greek yogurt earns its place here is not the calcium, and it is not even the protein, though both matter enormously as you age. The real reason is its high concentration of tryptophan, an amino acid your body converts into serotonin, which your brain then converts into melatonin, the hormone that governs your entire sleep cycle, from the moment your eyes get heavy to the moment you wake up rested or don't. Think of tryptophan as raw material delivered to a factory floor late at night. Your brain takes it in, processes it into serotonin, then transforms that into the melatonin your body needs to run its nightly maintenance shift. No raw material, no production. It's that simple and that important. But here is what makes this especially relevant after 60, and this is the part I really want you to understand. There is a well-documented pattern in aging biology called anabolic resistance. Simply the body's reduced ability to use protein effectively as the years add up. After 70, both muscles and brain become noticeably less efficient at pulling what they need from the protein in your meals, even when you're eating the same amount you always have. Research out of a university in the Netherlands found that slow-digesting proteins eaten in the evening, particularly the casein found abundantly in Greek yogurt, behave differently in the aging body than they do in a younger one. Because casein digests slowly over 6 to 8 hours, it provides a steady trickle of amino acids through the entire night, giving an aging metabolism a much longer window to actually use what it needs, rather than rushing past it the way faster proteins do. For your brain, that means a continuous supply of the raw material required to maintain synaptic connections, the tiny junctions between brain cells where memories are physically stored, moment by moment, all night long. 1 cup of full-fat Greek yogurt carries roughly 17 to 20 grams of protein, casein dominant, making it one of the more brain-friendly choices before bed that exists in an ordinary grocery store. A study from Florida State University found older adults who ate casein protein before sleep showed stronger overnight protein synthesis markers and improved cognitive flexibility the next day, the ability to shift smoothly between thoughts and tasks instead of feeling stuck or foggy. Here is exactly how to use it. 1 cup of full-fat Greek yogurt, never the fat-free kind, since you need that fat for absorption, about 45 minutes before bed. Add a few of those blueberries from number 5 if you like, since the combination tends to work well together. But skip the granola and skip anything sugary, because a sugar spike right before bed works directly against the repair process you're trying to support, undoing some of what you just set in motion. A quick safety note, and please don't skip past this one. If you are managing diabetes with medication, keep an eye on portion size here, since even plain yogurt carries natural sugars that can shift blood glucose overnight for some people. This is generally well tolerated by most, but check your numbers the first few times you try it, just to see how your body responds specifically. I know some of you are wondering whether dairy in general is even a good idea after 60, given everything you've heard over the years. Fair question. The research here is genuinely mixed, depending on the population studied, and if dairy has never agreed with you, there's no need to force it. Lactose-free Greek yogurt or a high-quality casein-based alternative can offer similar benefits without the discomfort. Now let me climb into the top 3. This is where it gets genuinely interesting, and where the science starts to feel less like nutrition and more like something close to medicine. Number 3. Walnuts. Not a generic handful of mixed nuts. Not almonds, not cashews, not pistachios. Walnuts specifically, because of a compound found in remarkably few foods on Earth, and I want to walk you through why that specificity actually matters. Let me tell you about someone who represents a pattern I have seen many times in practice. I will call her Margaret. 74 years old, a retired school teacher who had spent 4 decades in front of a classroom, the kind of woman who prided herself on remembering every student's name, every parent's face at conference night. Margaret came in frightened and frustrated in equal measure. She had been misplacing things, losing the thread of conversations halfway through a sentence, forgetting names she had known for decades. She described one moment that stayed with me. Standing in her own kitchen, holding her car keys, completely unable to remember why she had walked in there in the first place. She had been told this was simply normal aging, and that nothing could be done about it. Just get used to it, she was told. She left that appointment feeling, in her own words, like she was already disappearing. That's where the investigation began, walking through her typical day hour by hour. What time she woke, what she ate, when she took her medications, how she slept. On paper, everything looked reasonably healthy, nothing dramatic. But one detail stood out. Margaret almost never ate in the evening. She had read somewhere that eating after 6 was bad for weight management, and she had taken that advice seriously for years, going to bed on an essentially empty stomach most nights. So Margaret began eating a small handful of walnuts every night before bed, as part of a broader nighttime routine built around several of tonight's foods. The first week, she noticed nothing different, and told me as much, slightly skeptical. By week 3, she mentioned that mornings felt a little less foggy, though she wasn't sure if that meant anything. By week 6, she messaged to say she had remembered a former student's name out of nowhere, someone she hadn't thought of in years, and it had startled her how easily it surfaced. Within 8 weeks, she described it this way. She said it felt like someone had turned a light back on. Not blazing, not dramatic, just on again. Now, I want to be careful here, because Margaret's case represents a pattern, not a guarantee. Her results were on the better end of what I typically see, and everyone responds differently depending on their starting point, their overall health, and a dozen other factors. But the science behind what likely happened is worth understanding in detail. Walnuts are the only nut carrying a meaningful amount of a specific omega-3 fatty acid called alpha-linolenic acid, combined with a strong concentration of polyphenols and a unique antioxidant called ellagic acid. These compounds help your body maintain DHA, a fatty acid that makes up roughly 60% of your brain's structural fat, which is a staggering proportion when you stop to think about it. Picture DHA as the insulation wrapped around electrical wiring throughout your entire house. Without enough of it, signals between brain cells become slow, distorted, and inefficient, like wires with frayed, exposed insulation sparking and misfiring instead of carrying a clean signal straight through. After 65, your brain's ability to maintain its DHA levels tends to drop noticeably, often without anyone realizing it's happening, because the decline is gradual rather than sudden. Research published in the Journal of Nutrition, Health, and Aging found that older adults who regularly ate walnuts showed better memory scores, faster processing speed, and greater mental flexibility on standardized testing. A separate study from researchers at UCLA, involving more than 600 adults averaging 68 years old, found that higher walnut consumption was associated with a meaningfully lower risk of poor cognitive performance on testing. Now, association is not the same as proof of cause, and I want to be honest about that distinction with you. But across multiple studies conducted by different research teams, the pattern keeps showing up. And that's the kind of consistency that earns attention from any careful clinician. Timing matters here because of your brain's overnight cleaning system, sometimes called the glymphatic system, a network of channels that activates during deep sleep and flushes out metabolic waste, including the buildup linked to Alzheimer's disease. Think of it as a cleaning crew that only comes in after hours, once the building is empty and quiet. That cleaning process depends on healthy, flexible brain cell membranes, and those membranes are partly built from the very fats walnuts help supply. Here's exactly how to use this tonight. About 1 to 1.5 ounces of raw or dry roasted walnuts, roughly 14 halves, 60 minutes before sleep. Skip the oil roasted, heavily salted kind, since the added sodium and the oxidized oils work against the very benefit you're after. Pair it with the blueberries from number 5 if you'd like. The combination may offer a stronger anti-inflammatory effect than either alone, and it costs you less than the price of a single cup of coffee from a drive-through window. One note on safety, and this one is important. Walnuts are a common allergen, so if you have a known tree nut allergy, this one is obviously not for you, and please don't experiment to find out. And if you are watching calorie intake closely for any medical reason, a small handful is plenty. More is not better here, since walnuts are calorie-dense even in small quantities. I want to address something directly, because I know it's on some of your minds. You might be thinking, this all sounds reasonable, but is it too simple? Surely something this easy would already be common knowledge. I understand that instinct completely. But the truth is, simple and well-studied doesn't mean well-known. The gap between what research shows and what makes it into a routine 10-minute doctor's visit is enormous, and that gap is exactly what tonight is closing. But if walnuts surprised you, wait until you hear what is at number 2, because this is something cultures have relied on for thousands of years, long before modern medicine existed, and modern research is only now starting to explain why. Number 2, raw honey. I need to be precise here, because the honey sitting in most kitchen cabinets is a different product entirely from what I am describing. Raw, unprocessed honey, ideally manuka or a local raw wildflower variety, contains a flavonoid called pinosembrin, found in very few other foods on the planet. Early research out of a university in New Zealand suggests pinosembrin may support the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, the brain region most directly responsible for forming new memories. This kind of neuron growth, called neurogenesis, was once believed to stop entirely in adulthood. Researchers now know it continues throughout life inside the hippocampus, and that what you eat can influence it in both directions, like a dial that can be turned up or down depending on your habits. Raw honey appears to support it. Heavily processed sugar appears to work against it, which is exactly why I'm asking you to be precise about the type here. Why does this matter specifically after 65? Without active protective habits, the hippocampus tends to shrink gradually each year, and that shrinkage tracks closely with declining episodic memory, the kind that lets you recall conversations, experiences, and the names of people you love. It is the part of memory that makes a life feel like your own story, rather than a series of disconnected moments. Some preliminary research has linked raw honey consumption to higher levels of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. Think of BDNF as fertilizer scattered across a garden. It supports the growth and repair of neurons the way fertilizer supports new growth in soil that's been depleted. This research is still early, and I want to be honest about that, but it is compelling enough that I pay close attention to it. There is also honey's effect on cortisol, your stress hormone. Elevated cortisol at night can damage hippocampal cells over time and interfere with the deep sleep stages where memory consolidation actually happens. Some research suggests raw honey may gently support a healthier nighttime cortisol pattern, though again, more human research is needed before anyone should call this settled science. 1 to 2 teaspoons of raw honey, about 30 minutes before bed. More than that can spike insulin too aggressively and work against the very benefit you're after, undoing the calm you're trying to create. It needs to be raw and unheated, since pasteurization destroys many of the compounds in question, essentially turning it into flavored sugar water. Stir it into warm, not hot, herbal tea, or pair it with the Greek yogurt from number 4 for a combination that tends to work especially well together. Now this is critical, so listen closely, because this is exactly the kind of detail that gets skipped in a rushed appointment. If you are taking medication for diabetes, including metformin or insulin, talk to your doctor before adding honey to your evening routine. Even small amounts of sugar can shift your blood glucose, and the timing matters for your medication schedule specifically. If you have a history of botulism risk or are immunocompromised, raw, unpasteurized honey carries a small additional risk and should be discussed with your doctor first, no exceptions. And if you notice any unusual reaction after starting this, stop and check with your physician right away. Let me tell you about one more pattern I have seen, because I think it will resonate with some of you tonight. I'll call him Robert. 71, a retired engineer, the kind of man who took quiet, genuine pride in his sharp memory. He used to joke that he could recall technical specifications from projects decades old without blinking. When he began forgetting his neighbors' names mid-conversation, stopping cold in the middle of a sentence at the hardware store, he described it as one of the most disorienting experiences of his life. He told me he started avoiding conversations altogether, just to avoid the embarrassment of losing his train of thought in front of people. That isolation, more than the forgetting itself, was what worried me most when he first sat down across from me. Robert started an evening routine built around several of tonight's foods, raw honey among them, alongside fatty fish a few nights a week. The first 2 weeks brought no noticeable change, and he nearly gave up, telling me he felt foolish for expecting food to do anything meaningful. By week 5, his wife mentioned, almost in passing, that he seemed to be following conversations more easily at dinner. By week 8, he had started doing crossword puzzles again, something he had quietly given up months earlier because they had grown too frustrating to finish. After 10 weeks, he came back and told me directly that he felt like himself again, not perfect, but present. His results were strong. Yours may look different, faster, slower, or somewhere in between, and that's completely normal. What matters most is the direction, not the exact timeline, and not comparing your week 3 to someone else's week 3. And now, number 1. The most important food on tonight's list, and the one I told you most seniors have been advised for years to avoid. That food is fatty fish, wild-caught salmon, sardines, or mackerel, eaten as a light meal or snack roughly 2 hours before bed. I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You've been told to watch your cholesterol. You've been warned about eating before bed, told it leads to weight gain or poor sleep. You've heard a dozen reasons, over the years, to be cautious about fish in the evening specifically. I'm asking you to set those concerns aside for just a moment, because the gap between common advice and what the research actually shows has rarely been wider than it is right here. Wild-caught fatty fish is the richest dietary source of preformed DHA and EPA, 2 omega-3 fatty acids that are not just helpful for brain health, but structurally part of it, woven into the architecture itself. Your brain is roughly 60% fat by dry weight, and DHA is the single most important fat within that. Every neuron is wrapped in a membrane built largely from DHA. Every synaptic connection where a memory lives depends on it, the same way every room in a house depends on the wiring running through its walls. Here's the part specific to your age group, and I want you to really absorb this, because it explains why this particular food earns the top spot tonight. After 60, your liver's ability to convert plant-based omega-3s, the kind in walnuts and flaxseed, into usable DHA tends to decline substantially. For many people over 60, plant sources alone simply can't deliver what they once did back in your 40s, even if you're eating exactly the same diet you always have. Direct consumption of preformed omega-3s through fatty fish becomes the more reliable path, almost a non-negotiable one at this stage of life. Research from Rush University Medical Center, part of a large, long-term study following over 900 older adults, found that those who ate fish at least once a week scored on cognitive testing, in line with people roughly a decade younger than those who rarely or never ate fish. That is not a small effect, and I want you to sit with that for a moment. A decade of cognitive age tied to one weekly habit. The studies vary in exact magnitude depending on the population studied, but the direction is remarkably consistent across the research, which is precisely what makes this finding so compelling to people in my field. The evening timing matters again because of that overnight cleaning system discussed earlier. Healthy, DHA-rich cell membranes allow that cleaning fluid to flow more freely through brain tissue while you sleep, like water moving easily through a clean, flexible hose instead of one that's gone stiff and brittle with age. Some research from the University of Rochester found this overnight clearing process worked notably more efficiently when DHA levels were adequate, supporting exactly the kind of nightly maintenance your brain depends on. Wild salmon also carries astaxanthin, a carotenoid antioxidant that crosses the blood-brain barrier and is considered one of the more potent antioxidants studied, particularly for protecting the tiny energy-producing structures inside brain cells called mitochondria. Picture aging mitochondria like power plants that generate less energy and more waste over time, the way an old engine burns fuel less efficiently and leaves behind more exhaust. Astaxanthin appears to help support their function, keeping that engine running a little cleaner, a little longer. Fatty fish is also rich in vitamin D3, vitamin B12, and selenium, three nutrients where deficiency is common after 65. B12 deficiency alone affects a meaningful share of older adults and is linked to brain changes, memory issues, and mood disturbance, often mistaken for ordinary aging when it's actually a correctable deficiency. A single 4-ounce serving of wild salmon delivers a large share of your daily B12 need in one of its most usable, bioavailable forms. Research from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden followed over 1,000 adults aged 60 to 90 for 7 years and found that those with higher blood omega-3 levels at the start showed meaningfully less hippocampal shrinkage over that period compared to those with the lowest levels. The hippocampus is the memory center discussed all night. The one Margaret and Robert and so many others have felt quietly shrinking and were told nothing could be done. There is something you can do. I want that sentence to land, because so much of what you hear about aging treats decline as inevitable, as something to simply accept. This is one place where the research genuinely disagrees with that framing. Here's exactly how to put this into practice. Wild-caught Alaskan salmon, Atlantic sardines in water or olive oil, or Atlantic mackerel are your best options. A modest portion, about 2 hours before bed, baked or steamed rather than fried, 2 to 3 times a week to start. You don't need to overhaul your entire diet overnight. 2 or 3 evenings a week is enough to begin seeing the kind of pattern the research describes. One important note, and please don't skip this. If you are on blood-thinning medication, the omega-3s in fatty fish can have a mild additional blood-thinning effect, so talk to your doctor about your specific dosage and monitoring before making this a regular habit. If you have a known shellfish or fish allergy, this one is not for you, and there are other ways to support DHA levels your doctor can guide you through, including certain algae-based supplements. And as always, continue any prescribed medication exactly as directed. None of tonight's foods are meant to replace it. They're meant to work alongside it, supporting what your medication is already doing. I also want to address mercury, since I know it's on some of your minds. Wild-caught salmon, sardines, and mackerel are all considered lower mercury options compared to large predatory fish like swordfish or king mackerel. Eating these 2 to 3 times a week falls well within the safety guidelines most health organizations recommend, even for sensitive populations. Now let me set realistic expectations with you, because I genuinely don't want you disappointed 3 days from now, comparing yourself to a highlight reel instead of a real timeline. The first week, you likely won't notice much of anything, and that's completely normal. I want to be honest with you rather than overselling this. Most of what I've discussed tonight works on a cellular timeline, not an overnight one. Your brain is rebuilding membranes and clearing waste at a biological pace, not a magical one. By week 2 or 3, many people start to notice small things, an easier time recalling a word that used to slip away, a slightly clearer morning. Nothing dramatic yet, just small cracks of light. By week 4 and beyond, for many people, that's when it becomes more noticeable. Conversations feel a little easier to follow. Names surface a little faster. not magic. Just biology, finally given the raw materials it needed all along. I know some of you are thinking, this sounds like a lot to keep track of every single night. I understand that completely. You don't need to do all 5 foods perfectly every night to see benefit. Start with 1 or 2 that feel manageable. Consistency over weeks matters far more than perfection on any single evening. So there you have it. Blueberries, Greek yogurt, walnuts, raw honey, and wild-caught fatty fish. 5 ordinary foods sitting in your grocery store this week, working quietly through the night to support the most irreplaceable thing you own. You don't need a prescription for this. You don't need anyone's permission. You only need to begin tonight with whichever one of these 5 feels easiest to start with. If something in tonight's video gave you even a small piece of hope, hit that like button so this reaches someone else who needs to hear it. Someone who's lying awake right now, worrying about the exact same thing you were worrying about an hour ago. And before you go, type the words "I finish it" in the comments if you stayed with me to the end, and share this with one person tonight. Your spouse, your sibling, a friend who's been worried about their memory too, the way Margaret and Robert once were. Next week, I want to walk you through the one morning habit that may be undoing everything you build tonight while you sleep. Something almost everyone over 60 does within minutes of waking up, without ever questioning it, and without ever realizing what it might be costing them. I'll see you then.